I am not a scientist, but I will create the market conditions by which the advent of superhumanity can come to be. If you could give your son or daughter a pill that would make them smarter, would you give them the pill? Neurological enhancement seems to be very acceptable. Physical enhancement has moral questions about it. We have a life in 3 acts, 0 to 18, 18 to 65, 65 onwards. 18 makes sense, but 65 is purely arbitrary. If a 65-year-old can run faster than Usain Bolt, should we all be retiring at 65? When I started the Enhanced Games in 2023, the world decried it as a joke. And ultimately, we've proven them all wrong. I believe that the Enhanced Games can usher us into the next age, the enhanced age, when 44% of athletes are taking banned performance-enhancing substances and only 1% are getting caught. We're bringing honesty and transparency to the system. The Olympics are the ultimate avenue of human competition, but the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has never had competition of its own, but we're giving them a run for the money.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Today's guest is Aron D'Souza, a lawyer, entrepreneur, and the mastermind behind some of the most disruptive legal and investment strategies you've probably never heard of, but definitely felt. He helped orchestrate the Peter Thiel-backed lawsuit that bankrupted Gawker, shaking up the media world. And now he's turning heads again, pioneering new frontiers in AI, finance, and legal theory. Aron, you've been described as everything from a genius strategist to a shadowy fixer. When you look in the mirror, who do you see, and how much of that image is shaped by what the world gets wrong about you?
Well, Tim, thank you very much for having me on your show. I've done over 2,000 interviews in the last 2 years, and probably that's the most insightful question anyone has asked me. From the New York Times to the front cover of The Economist, I feel like journalists always ask me the same question over and over. And when I look in the mirror every morning, I still feel like I'm the same person. I'm the same kid who had dreams and aspirations. I feel like I haven't changed very much as a person, despite the fact that it seems like everything around me has changed. I've gone from being a simple kid growing up in the rural countryside of Australia to now, as you said, orchestrating some of the greatest disruptions in law and in sports that the world has ever seen. But I still feel like I'm the same person. And I hope I'm true and authentic to young me.
Yeah, my guess is you're going to get a lot of questions you haven't heard before. That's
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. I've done thousands of these interviews, and it's just always the same thing.
Was there a single moment, maybe on the rugby pitch at Oxford or in the courtroom sketching strategy, where you first felt called to push boundaries?
That's a great question. When was the first time I felt called to push boundaries? When I give people career advice or ask them questions about their future, I always ask one very simple question. Do you want to lead an ordinary life, or do you want to lead an extraordinary life? And everyone almost always says that they want the extraordinary life. They want the fame, the adoration, the cars, the jets, the yachts, the mansions. But when actually drilling into it, very few people actually want to make the extraordinary sacrifice that is required to have an extraordinary life. I'm sure, Tim, you made extraordinary sacrifices along your way on your great journey. And I think as a young person, I made that choice. I said I wanted to do something truly extraordinary with my life, and I was willing to make extraordinary sacrifices for it. And the one that I think of very poignantly as I have Tim and his son Troy on screen is that um, I've chosen not to have children. I'm 40 years old, and I chose not to have children because I believe that the contribution I will make to mankind is greatest through the enhanced games, not by raising offspring. And I'm not sure if I that's the right decision for me to make in this moment in time. Sometimes I question that, but I know that to achieve something extraordinary requires extraordinary sacrifice.
I'm going to argue with you that you could have kids and do both, but we'll save that argument for after.
Okay.
Your mother's Chinese heritage and your Australian upbringing gives you a foot in two cultures. How has that blended identity influenced the way you see fair play and ambition?
That is a great question. I'm loving this interview. You can have all the time you want with me. Um, yeah, so my mother is Chinese and my father is Indian. They met in Australia, and I think of myself as Australian. Um, my mother's family is very interesting because they are the oldest uh, non-European immigrant family in Australia. My great great grandfather actually founded the Westpac Bank, which is the third largest bank in Australia. And we have this long family tradition and deep connection to Australia that goes back nearly 200 years. Um, However, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations along the history of my mother's family, and it's a fascinating story, which probably would be befitting of an Amy Tang story, the author of the Joy of Luck Club. And Chinese culture, I think, is very different from Western culture. Traditional Chinese culture believes that it takes generations to do anything. My grandmother worked in a restaurant so that her daughter and son could become doctors and lawyers with the hope that their children would become, senators and billionaires. Um, and they knew that it would take 100 years to build something of significance. And so that long-term time horizon, I think, is a unique quality of a civilization that has been, as Xi Jinping says, the dominant civilization for the totality of human history, that thinks in millennia, not just centuries. And that long-term goal orientation is very important. And I think something that is lost in Western culture in a 4-year electoral cycle today.
Yeah, I don't know how you find like the in between. Maybe it's you don't have. It's hard because you don't want the lifelong politicians, right? Because that always leads to some kind of corruption, no matter what country you're in or where you are in the world. But you also, if you're only thinking in 4-year spurts of getting real or 2-year spurts, depending on the office you're in, of getting reelected, yeah, you're making a lot of sacrifices for the long term.
That's right. And actually, I could talk all day about how we could improve our democracy. So before Mr. Green, we can continue on to your next question. I might actually address your point, Troy, which is how do we build a long-term focused nation without sacrificing our democracy, right? So typically, when we talk about the need for a long-term thinking, the ideas tend towards Lee Kuan Yew style benevolent dictatorship. However, I think the problem is not terms, but actually it's politics. So, you two are both very smart, and Mr. Green, you have a great number of law textbooks behind you, it looks like. Um, in the original democracy in ancient Athens, they did not have elections. Do you know, maybe Troy, how they selected their leaders?
No, I don't. I'm loving this though. This is the kind of stuff I nerd out on. So keep
Yeah,
going.
so we believe that for a country to be democratic, it must have elections. Not all countries that have elections are democratic, like North Korea or China, but all democratic countries have elections, so we think. But in the original democracy, the democracy of Plato and of Socrates, the one that is the inspiration for the founding fathers and the democracy that we have today, there were no elections. They select their leaders by a method called sortition, where they would put the names of all the leaders in a hat, of all the citizens in a hat, and draw them out at random. And so instead of having politicians who are vying for your vote, there was actually a representative sample of all the citizens
I didn't
in the
know that.
leadership. And I think this is actually something that is underappreciated, and probably will be the next big project of my life, is to bring sortition democracy into reality. Because I'm a firm believer. I have a very simple theory of social change. I believe change only happens when someone puts a suit on and goes to work every day to try and solve a problem. And I think of examples such as Nigel Farage here in Britain. I met him in 2009, long before he even started the UKIP party, and he has probably made a greater change to British democracy than anyone in recent history, by forcing through the exit from the European Union, and now looks to be on the road to being prime minister. And he put a suit on and he went to work every day to get Britain to leave the European Union, and he galvanized a social movement around that. Conversely, I look at social movements like Me Too or BLM, hugely viral, very successful in terms of initial reach, but there was no one in a suit, there was no office, so that institutionalism did not follow. And so when I think about sortition democracy and how we can be democratic without being political, I just simply ask the question. I don't think there's anyone who actually has an office and that wears a suit and goes there every day trying to bring that into reality. And that might be my next great project. It's on the long list of things that and the challenges that I want to solve in my life. I'm only
What
40
kind of
years old, so I've got another 50 years to go.
this is great. This is not at all where I thought this call was going to go or this conversation was going to go. So this is perfect. Where do you think that? Do you think did they have minimum standards or anything like that back in the day, or it was truly everyone over a certain age just would be?
Well, and at that time, so it was everyone who was a citizen. So that meant men who were of age and who were landowners. However, today I could see a world in which every eligible voter is available for selection. And I think that we have many entrenched deep problems in our society. And so in America, why won't they ever fix the subway in New York City? Well, it's because all the politicians have chauffeured cars that take them to work every day. Why won't we be able to fix healthcare? Well, the politicians all have access to the best quality private healthcare. Why won't we fix public schools? Because all the politicians send their kids to private school. But actually, if we have a sortition democracy, where or otherwise known as a jury democracy, we could select, the system would select at random people, right? And actually, people who have lived experience with these actual problems, rather than these sort of invented high-class liberal limousine problems that no one really faces, but that divide our society today.
That's a really interesting take. I don't know if people would ever go for it now. Aron, on this show, we wrestle with big questions of faith and fairness. How do you reconcile the enhanced game's anything goes philosophy with the timeless notion that competition should be a level playing field?
Well, Tim, that's a great question. I think that you could have multiple level playing fields. So from 1896 until 1992, only amateur athletes were allowed to compete at the Olympic Games. However, there were many other parallel sports competitions that were for professional athletes. The Olympics core credo is about the amateur nature of sport and how that professional sport violates the integrity of sport. It's ungentlemanly, it's sinful, etc. And so the enhanced games are not anything goes. There's a very comprehensive rule set, scientific and medical guidelines, and it's a level playing field, but it's a different playing field from natural sports. And just as Paralympic competition is different from Olympic competition, enhanced games is very different from Olympic competition. There can be multiple avenues of competition going on simultaneously. However, to reconcile that with the economics of modern sport is the challenge, I think, in particular for the Olympics. And I always say that no one is interested in watching F2. Everyone watches F1. No one watches minor league baseball. Everyone watches Major League Baseball. Why? Because we're only interested in seeing the very best of human competition. And enhanced athletes will just be faster, stronger, have longer career longevity. And so ultimately, I think we're going to win because we produce just a objectively better entertainment product.
I've always said that with the Olympics, it's like every event, if you're watching the best of the best of the best compete, everyone seems, relatively speaking, normal on TV. Like when you see Usain Bolt winning, obviously he's the fastest man, or at the time, the fastest man on the planet, but he's only winning by, split seconds compared to, I always say, like, you got to have one normal, just like an average Joe, run in the event, like make a lane next to him, or show like an average Joe time compared to, it's like with the enhanced games, how much do you think, like the sprinter, or pick any event you want, like what do you think the real difference is going to be between the Olympics and the enhanced games in terms of, is it going to be noticeable enough of a difference for the entertainment value that you're talking about?
Well, I think the evidence is that 44% of elite athletes admit to using banned performance enhancing substances, according to research funded and commissioned by the International Olympic Committee. And so what we are comparing against is not a truly natural athlete with an enhanced athlete. It's sort of a hidden enhanced athlete against an openly enhanced athlete. And the real difference will be minor. We're talking maybe 1 or 2%. However, that's a new threshold of human performance. But what I would point to is that we've already broken our first world record. Christian Golomev of Greece, in an exhibition event earlier this year, broke the 50 freestyle world record in swimming, the most important record in swimming. But he was 31 years old when he did that, 10 years older than you would ever expect a swimmer to break a world record. And so I believe the greatest gift that we will give to our society is not a 21-year-old running faster than Usain Bolt, but a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and maybe one day a 65-year-old. Because ultimately we are in the business of cultural change. We have a life in 3 acts: 0 to 18, childhood; 18 to 65, adulthood; 65 onwards, senior citizens. 18 makes sense. It's the age of sexual maturity. But 65 is purely arbitrary. It was actually, if you understand the history, picked by Napoleon as a way to cheat his soldiers out of a pay rise, where they traded it for a pension. It's actually a fascinating history. And so if a 65-year-old can run faster than Usain Bolt, should we all be retiring at 65? Or will we conceive of a world where we can actually be faster and stronger and younger for longer?
When you announced the enhanced games in 2023, people called it a stunt. Now you've got Olympians on the roster. What are you hearing behind the scenes from these athletes?
When I started the enhanced games in 2023, the world decried it as a joke. I actually have a cover from the Spectator magazine, the old establishment magazine here in London, that said that the enhanced games couldn't happen. And they went on this long diatribe about why our idea would fail. And ultimately, we've proven them all wrong. They said we couldn't raise money, we couldn't sign athletes, we couldn't get a host city. But we've done all of those things and so much more. And I always like to say the Olympics are the ultimate avenue of human competition. But the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has never had competition of its own. And so we have been able to create a competitor, and we have them running scared. But what I would point to is that every legacy incumbent thinks of the disruptor as a joke. The taxi cabs thought Uber was a joke. Blockbuster Video famously had the opportunity to purchase Netflix, but they considered it a joke, right? When you are a multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate with your giant headquarters and your limousines and private jets, you feel indestructible. But we know throughout history that institutions do not last very long. Sears was the biggest company in the world. They built the world's tallest building, and now it doesn't even exist. Blockbuster, Netflix, we can go on and on. And the Olympics may be one of the most durable monopolies in history, but we're giving them a run for the money. And when 44% of athletes are cheating and taking banned performance enhancing substances and only 1% are getting caught, we're bringing honesty and transparency to the system.
Is the 44%, that's Olympic athletes or all professional athletes?
So that 44% is a survey conducted by professors Ulrich and Comstock and published in the Journal of Sports Medicine in 2012. They surveyed the World Athletics Championships, so every athlete attending the World Athletics Championships, and gave them an iPad and asked them to determine, through a randomized control trial, randomized control survey trial, asked them about what drugs they were using. And 44% of them just admitted that they use banned substances.
I'm going to tell you,
Likewise,
I'm sure you know this, but if 44 said yes, there's probably a lot more on it because
that's true, right? So, and in another survey, which was published also in the Journal of Sports Medicine, found that 99% of elite track and field competitors have used EPO, which is a banned substance, male competitors, and 56% of female competitors. So what we realize is that basically every elite athlete is taking banned substances. They're not getting caught. The system is not working. So why hide it? Why hide innovation? We know that 100% of students are using ChatGPT, right? So why lie about it? Let's just do it out in the open. Let's benefit from the technology, and we will have gradually improved and better technology.
Yeah, I mean, your two options, right, are either to figure out a way to catch it, not ChatGPT, look for the long hyphen, but for the Olympic athletes, you either figure out how to catch them using EPO or
Well,
go
it's
open
actually
season.
it's a failed system because according to the scientists, they cannot develop high quality drug tests without control data. You need to know what normal elite athlete blood levels are, but you also need to know what an enhanced athlete's blood levels are. And there are no enhanced athletes, there are no athletes putting up their hand and saying, "Oh, I'm an enhanced athlete, and this is the dosage I'm taking of EPO." And so they don't have the right calibration data, so the test definitionally will never work.
In 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you got me excited for the enhanced games.
Well, I'm actually going to Switzerland tomorrow, and headlining a conference on sports ethics, where the lead ethics advisor to the International Olympic Committee is debating me on stage, and I'm very looking forward to that opportunity because they don't have a moral leg to stand on.
You've said that the enhanced games could redefine what it means to be human. What does that future look like, and how close are we to it?
50 years is the answer. And why do I say that? Is because I've made a study of how long it takes to go from science fiction to scientific reality. So Jules Verne wrote A Journey to the Moon in 1859, and it was an absolute insane version of science fiction. Right, no one had ever flown in a heavier than air airplane, and he postulated how to get to the moon. And if you read that book, it's actually deeply insightful and remarkably correct. And it took 110 years for it to become reality. From 2001: A Space Odyssey, with HAL the talking computer, to Alexa, is about 50 years. From the Jetsons with the robot vacuum cleaner to the Roomba is about 50 years. And I believe that now that we've really started the enhanced movement, in less than 50 years' time, we will be full, kind of X-Men type superheroes, and have superpowers. Why is that? Because we only need one wonder drug. to be worth $1 trillion. Uh, and that's evidenced by Ozempic and the GLP-1 drugs. And so um, Ozempic has created $1 trillion in enterprise value because instead of going to the gym all the time, you can just take a shot and get skinny. Well, if you could just take a shot and become a chiseled Greek god, how many people would do that? Well, a very large number of people, which would then create a multi-trillion-dollar market. And then it becomes a simple postulation of if I had $1 trillion to spend on research and development, could we develop one more wonder drug? And then another, and then another. And here, the use case is not therapeutic. It's not to treat a disease, but rather to improve the condition of most, if not all, human beings. So the addressable market is much larger. And so I am not a scientist, although I have a PhD in law. It is that, but I will create the market conditions by which the advent of superhumanity can come to be. And I don't think superhumanity is going to be like Superman. It's actually going to be a lot more like Batman. It's a combination of engineered science, so cybernetics, brain-computer interfaces, and artificial intelligence, and pharmacological enhancements of performance-enhancing drugs. And you mix those three ingredients together, and that's when we are truly going to be able to overcome our biological limits. Some of the limitations your father has would have been um, debilitating or even fatal a generation ago. And now through the magic of technology, we're having a conversation, right? And be able to overcome any limits.
But how do you balance like so the wonder drug that everybody gets chiseled and all that? First of all, when you have it, call me. But the second part of it is it's like take Ozempic. Are you worried about whatever that EPO, whatever? I know Olympic athletes or Olympic level athletes, enhanced game athletes aren't taking Ozempic, but anabolic steroids or testosterone or EPO or those things. What about like the longevity of the life and long term health issues and concerns?
Well, so that's interesting. So, a lot of my critics from the Olympic Committee will say, "Oh, well, steroids are unsafe," uh, and then I say, "Well, what is your evidence to suggest that?" Because the scientific evidence is actually quite compelling. Professor David Nutt from Imperial College London, publishing in The Lancet in 2012, did an all-cause risk analysis associated with recreational um, and performance drugs. And the highest risk drug, alcohol. Number two, heroin. And in the middle, tobacco and cannabis. But far lower risk was anabolic steroids. Now, another way to put this is on an epidemiological or population health level. 6% of British men have taken anabolic steroids at some point in their life. You don't go to the ER on Friday night and see an epidemic of bodybuilders and powerlifters needing treatment. And so when you have large usage but low hospital admissions, that's a strong indicator of the efficacy and health of a product. And my critics often use very emotive arguments against the enhanced games, and I say, don't use your emotional anecdotes, but let's use scientific evidence. And the scientific evidence is that steroids, synthetic growth hormones like testosterone and EPO, have been widely used. They have not caused a public health crisis, and ultimately they've been around for nearly 100 years, so the toxicologies and the drug-on-drug interactions are very well known. Even the 1939 Nobel Prize was awarded for the synthesis of testosterone. So we're talking about Nobel Prize winning science here.
Yeah, yeah. I was always told I don't know that much about it. I was always told it gave you like long term heart issues and liver issues and things like that. Are you saying that that's not true, or you're saying it takes like a level of abuse of that or usage of that would I don't
Yeah.
know.
So the use of excessive amounts of any substance, whether it's aspirin or water, will cause adverse health consequences. There's an optimal amount of every substance to take. But even with black market steroids, self-administered, they're still safer than cannabis or alcohol, according to Professor Nutt's survey. But every athlete at the Enhanced Games is not self-administering. They are doing so under full clinical and scientific supervision. And so if you look at the headlines about creatine in the late 90s, this is after creatine was popularized by the British rowing team at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. The headlines were that creatine is the new super steroid. It's very dangerous from you. People are dying from it. It's causing kidney failure. Uh, and that was all hyperbole. It was clickbait to sell newspapers. And today you can buy creatine, on Amazon or at Joe and the Juice.
You've also said that athletes today are limited by outdated rules. What would it mean to finally compete without those boundaries?
That's a great question. And I think it's actually not just about what it means to compete without those boundaries, but what is it to exist in a system that has a technology cap. So if you imagine in the 1950s, there were some universities, including my alma mater, Oxford, that said that handwriting was somehow the authentic representation of the mind, and they effectively banned the typewriter, right? If all universities did that, we would have never got the computer, and we would have never got artificial intelligence. The same has happened in sports. There was a technology cap put on in the 1980s with the creation of the World Anti-Doping Agency, and there's been effectively no R&D and no technological progress. Now we're taking that cap off. Okay, in the first Enhanced Games, we use current state-of-the-art technology. We enhance athletes. We will break all the world records. But that's going to create the market conditions where we will break the world records. We will sell a lot of drugs and media rights. We'll reinvest that money into developing new drugs, which will allow us to break more world records and be in this positive feedback cycle where the end conclusion, or maybe the first stop, is where we truly can become superhuman, where everyone can become superhuman, and where we can overcome our biological limits.
Is there something about that though? Like I know I'm saying this to the wrong guy, but like I'm just thinking if someone worked their whole life and they're the fastest swimmer, and somebody else passes them because they're using some kind of supplement, or I almost look at it as like a technology. Like if you showed up to race somebody swimming and you had an engine or a motor or something like that, like mechanical flippers, and you win. It's like it feels something about it feels off, and I don't know if that's just generation upon generation of the Olympics preaching kind of the fairness. And I think you're saying that people are cheating anyways. They're just doing it in a way that they get away with it. I don't know, something about it. How do you get over that? Do you not see it that way at all, or do you have a way that you get over that?
Yeah, so I think of it like Formula One. So Bernie Ecclestone, who is effectively the founder of modern Formula One, whose house I can see outside my front door here, he's my neighbor, is he lobbied very hard for the Olympics to include motorsport. And Juan Antonio Samaranch, the longtime Olympic dictator, would always say that motorsport is not a sport because it involves mechanical propulsion. And if you saw Charles Leclerc or Michael Schumacher, you would never doubt that they are in fact athletes. And Formula One is a very profitable and exciting sport today. And I think of Formula One as the athlete and the engineer working together, and the Enhanced Games are the athlete and the scientist working together. It's a different kind of sport, but it is sport. And the Olympics do not have a monopoly on the definition of sport. They like to think that they do, but it's only because in 1896, Baron Pierre de Coubertin came up with the idea of the modern Olympics. And he had this, it's a brilliant idea, which is you take sport, which is just, some guys kicking a ball in a field, and then you put national uniforms on it and you say, we don't need to go to war anymore. We can just simulate it on a football pitch or on a track or in the pool. And that's a wonderful idea. And the core objective about the Olympics is peace. I call it kumbaya. The core objective of the enhanced games is not peace. We're not here to make the world a friendlier and more welcoming place and be a ground for political nationalism. We are a unabashed scientific project. We are here to make humans better. And those are two very different messages, and two very different visions of sport.
And do you think they can both survive?
Well, that's a good question. So why did professional sport win and amateur sport lose? And the final nail in the coffin of amateur sport has happened with the professionalization of the NCAA in the United States. So professional sport won because the athletes wanted it. They wanted to be paid for the fruits of their labor. They weren't interested in the mental gymnastics of gentlemanly amateurism. Professional athletes were better because they could be focused on their training, and they had longer career longevity because they could actually just make a living from it. And so that's why all sport now today is professional. And the idea of being like the amateur, track and field world champion or this amateur swimming world champion, which used to be a very important thing, doesn't exist anymore.
Aaron, I like people who are really odd, like myself, and this is perfect. I hope this is not an insult. I think you're perfectly odd. It's awesome.
Well, if you do, if you do what everyone else does, you get what everyone else gets.
I agree with you.
And people, said I was crazy or insane or, I should just stay in my place. But I've always rejected that. I say, I want to build the world that I want to live in. And no one else is going to build the future. If you want a better future, you have to overcome your limitations and bend the destiny of history to your will.
Paint the scene for us. It's May 2026 in Las Vegas. The final 100-meter lineup steps onto the track. What do you hope the world sees in that moment? And why Las Vegas?
So what does the world feel in that moment? Why was the moon landing such a powerful moment? And actually, when Americans are surveyed and asked what was the most important moment in American history, more Americans say the moon landing than anything else. So why is that the case? Well, the moon landing was amazing because it has this great buildup, right? It has this buildup of technology. You've got to make these extraordinary rockets. You have to do these test runs. But the actual moon landing was on, I want to say, the third or fourth day from the launch. So the whole world watched in anticipation for 4 days as these astronauts traveled through space. And it all then gets encapsulated in this one beautiful moment where Neil Armstrong opens the hatch, steps onto the surface of the moon, and completes the vision of Kennedy. He completes the vision of Jules Verne 110 years prior. So the whole world is watching the enhanced games, right? Every interview that I do, every journalist that writes about this, why do they write about it with such interest? Well, in some ways, many journalists write about this because they hope it will fail, right? They think this is going to be, this story where it just couldn't possibly work. And so as we get much closer to the games, everyone's going to be watching. The whole world will be watching and saying, this extraordinary experiment, backed by the world's greatest investors, with giant money spent for this 1 10-second opportunity. Can we break the 100-meter world record? And I think the eyes of the world will be on it. And the outcome will be, are we going to step in to the next era of mankind? Or are we stuck? And I think the enhanced games will be viewed, like Neil Armstrong, as a threshold moment for the 10th age of mankind. So it is said today that we live in the information age, but that feels very outdated. It's a PC on every desk, the information superhighway. It's very Bill Gates 1980s. And I believe that the enhanced games can usher us into the next age, the enhanced age, where our biology is no longer our limit, that technology can enhance the human condition. It can make us physically stronger, mentally more resilient, and civilizationally impregnable. Um, and this could be one of the most extraordinary moments in human history. And what better time to do it than in the 250th birthday of the United States, in the country that has defined 4 of the 10 ages of mankind.
You clearly have a passion for it. And you talked about the, like kind of once you get your brain on a mission, it's all encompassing. It's all you can focus on, all you think about, all you do. How did you start down this path? I mean, it's clear you're on the path. It's clear your dedication and all that. But how do you, I mean, is it as a fan of sports, or it sounds like it's nothing to do with sports, it's about advancing humanity. What made you say, hey, I think drugs can increase the human life?
Um, well, it's actually quite random. So, I'm a voracious reader. I have like hundreds of books scattered throughout my office here. And when I was a student at Oxford nearly 20 years ago, I read a paper by Professor Julian Savulescu, who's a prominent bioethicist, who argued for the moral imperative to include enhancements in sports, particularly at the Olympic Games. And I just sort of parked that in my mind. And when and I have a tradition every Christmas to New Year, the week that no one is working, nothing is happening in the world, I do what I really enjoy. I rent a house somewhere beautiful, usually on the beach, and I write the business plan for a new organization or company that I want to start. Every year I do this. And in Christmas 2022, I wrote the business plan for the Enhanced Games. And it just made so much sense when I pulled the data together. 44% of athletes are doping. The average U.S. Olympian lives in poverty. The president of the International Olympic Committee flies around the world in a private jet. Right? You have this super unequal system that has a lie at the core of it, and I felt it was ripe for disruption. And at the same time, the house that I rented was in Miami, and I noticed everyone in Miami is like kind of enhanced. And I thought this is the time. This is the time in the history of mankind where we can throw off the shackles that have been limiting our bodies and build something better and new.
Was I a fool to buy into the moral argument about not using steroids while everyone was using steroids around me?
Okay, so let me give a touch of context here, just because I think it's a great question, and I want Aaron to make sure he knows. So my dad was a first-round NFL draft pick, and he played in an era that steroids were not yet banned in the 80s and 90s, and at that time, like the joke was that even kickers were on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, my dad, didn't take steroids because the little bit of the moral side of it, where he felt like it was cheating, and then also the thoughts of long-term health. That's one of the reasons why I think the mashup of you two guys is so interesting, because my dad's communication is obviously, slowed down 100x compared to what it was, but he was at, the peak of athletics and chose not to go that route. And, you're on the opposite end of the spectrum where you're kind of bringing that route to the forefront. So it's interesting. So I guess his question, paraphrasing, was he a fool for not doing it back then?
Well, I'm a firm believer in an individual's right to choose. So I don't think that your dad should have taken it because everyone else was. But I do believe in a competitive environment, you should use every tool that is available to you to your full advantage. And the problem about performance enhancing drugs today in the Olympic system is that there are information deficits. So, most people don't know that you could actually just go to a doctor in Fifth Avenue and they can do comprehensive blood work, MRIs, echocardiograms to rule out the vast majority of risk associated with taking steroids or synthetic growth hormones. And that's what we're trying to do more than anything else, which is to democratize information and reduce those information barriers so that everyone has a fair chance. Um, and the the justification. So a journalist asked me a good question a few days ago, which was, you always, they're like, Dr. D'Souza, you make this comparison between yourself and the Olympics. Just because the Olympics is really bad doesn't make you good. I said, that's a very smart analysis, right? But then that in debate would be called a comparative analysis. And so we need to start from our philosophical first principles. And on a philosophical basis, I believe that the fundamental human right is not freedom of speech or freedom of association. It's actually the freedom of our own bodies. And this is a very modern right, because until the 20th century, women's bodies were owned by men. Men's bodies were owned by the church, by God, and in many cases, our bodies were owned by slave owners or by kings or feudal lords. And so only in the 20th century is it true that all adults own their bodies. And this is really the axiomatic assumption of modernity, that human beings, adults, own their bodies and can do with their bodies what they wish. And so extending from that is, if we own our bodies and we accept that as true, then we should be able to do with our bodies what we wish, including enhancing them. And I think that is a very simple intellectual thesis, and one which is eminently hard to disagree with.
I think that part of the risk is, in my head, as I'm thinking, I've got young kids, and part of the risk is, does my 4-year-old, when he's 8 years old or 10 years old, see that an enhanced games athlete and say, oh my gosh, I want to be just like Sally, and start trying to find a way to, does it bleed into where kids are doing it, and does that, and again, I don't know the scientific ramifications, the health ramifications of that. I would have told you before this that steroids are bad for you long term. I didn't realize the I guess more the data on it, but that's kind of the one of the things that I see on kind of trying to argue against you or debate a little bit on it is, does it bleed into the youth?
Okay, so who are the two largest sponsors of Olympic sport? Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Two organizations that have done more damage to public health than any other entities in the totality of human history. The title sponsor of the recent World Aquatics Championship is Corona beer. 1/3 of all drowning deaths are associated with alcohol. If your young child watches Formula One, would that mean that they're encouraged to drive too fast? No. We know that driving is an age-gated activity, just like gambling or alcohol. Again, very large sponsors of professional sport are age-gated. So I don't think it's a problem if children run around wearing superhero capes and pretending that they have superpowers, knowing that superpowers only come to adults. I'm a gay man, and I'm very sensitive to the issues of the LGBT community, and but I diverge a lot from members of my community in that I believe that adults should be able to transition gender. I have no philosophical problem with that. However, I don't believe that children can consent to one-way medical procedures. And the transgenderism debate really fell apart when they started arguing that children should be subjected to irreversible medical procedures. So in that same way, I believe that adults with free and informed consent should be able to enhance themselves, but children are off limits.
So what would you put the limit at for if children say that they want to start getting enhanced, right? And I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. If you would need more research, don't feel like I'm trying to trap you in it.
No. I've got all the research. So what's the question?
So the question is, enhanced games takes off, whatever. And now kids, they start saying, well, hey, if we're enhancing athletes at this age and we're seeing positive results, kind of like you were saying about the, transitioning genders, you're saying kids, keep it away from kids. At what age do you say, hey, it's okay, let's have enhanced high school sports. Let's have an enhanced youth league sports. Like, what's the age where you think it's okay to start that?
Well, so this is already happening. So the use of growth hormones among American boys is very high, and it's done under full medical supervision. Why is this? Is because parents have now realized, particularly upper middle class parents, is that if their son is short, their life opportunities are much more limited. And short doesn't mean dwarfism; it means being 5'5", right? Their options in the dating pool are much shorter. Their options in sport are much more limited. And actually, their overall lifetime career earning potential is more limited. And so, in some suburbs of the United States, 10% of boys are on growth hormones. And these are fully medically prescribed within the ambit of the law. And so, the enhancement of children is already happening. There are children being born today who have been subject to CRISPR gene editing technology. So they did not consent to those procedures. They're totally irreversible, and they are with them their whole life. So they are fully enhanced from birth. And so, as much as I say that the enhanced games will only accept athletes over the age of 18, we have a culture of enhancement now that is going to become increasingly prevalent. And as I said at the outset, I probably won't have kids, but if I did, and I in particular had sons, I would ensure that they're tall. I would do everything possible to ensure that they are not subject to the tyranny of height. And we've all read the statistics about Tinder and the dating prospects of short men. If we can avoid that, why not? Let's overcome the genetic lottery.
So if in a scenario where you have a magic wand and everyone's going to listen to you on enhancement, what age would you allow it to start happening with kids, or not necessarily kids? What age would you allow it to start happening?
So we would only accept those over the age of 18 to compete at the enhanced games. However, medical science and the medical community has already determined that doctors can prescribe enhancements for non-therapeutic reasons to children with parental consent.
Yeah, it's a little scary, isn't it? Or no, maybe not. But
Well, is it scary, or is it that we that the ultimate ambition of our society is the elimination of aristocracies? Once it was the aristocracy of birth and nobility, but now we have a genetic aristocracy. There are some people are taller, some people are stronger, and why can't we overcome those limits, right? Let's frame it another way that might be less, philosophically problematic, which is, if you could give your son or daughter a pill that would make them smarter, would you give them the pill? If you
yes,
ensure that, of course you would, right?
yeah.
You would weigh that up against potential side effects, long-term risk reward ratios, costs, etc. But I don't think that very many parents would say, yeah, you know what, I'd like my child to be naturally intelligent, right? Because then you would say, well, actually, should we not give them a premium subscription to ChatGPT? Because that might, reduce their natural intelligence. We have lots of aids today that make us smarter, that improve our performance in one way or another. Okay, yes, they're not all pharmacological interventions, but some of them are. And we have, view this as largely unproblematic. And so neurological enhancement seems to be very acceptable. Physical enhancement has maybe moral questions about it, but it's certainly very acceptable in some categories of people in the United States, and I think will only increase in popularity over time.
Anything permanent in kids scares me. Anything like makes me at least pause and think twice about it. Just I don't know that
Yeah,
it,
and,
like
as I think we should. I think that anything that involves irreversible body modification
yeah.
for individuals who are not fully capable of consent should be done in the most modest of ways. However, our neurology is very much influenced by things like the smartphone, right? Do you prevent your children from using smartphones and devices, even though they are engineered to be addictive? And they're probably more addictive, according to Professor Jonathan Haidt from NYU, than hard like party drugs. Um, and they're probably causing irreversible damage to the development of the brain.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like part of it is like you all the way back to politics. A part of it is almost like protecting people from themselves too, right? Because like take Coca-Cola and take McDonald's. If that's affordable and you're seeing it and you don't have the well, whether you're ignorant or willfully ignorant to what that means health wise, do you protect people from themselves and say I don't know. It's so hard to
It's
say.
a tough one. It's a tough one, right?
Yeah, it
So
is.
on many levels, I'm a libertarian. I say that individuals with full and informed consent should be able to do to their bodies what they wish. Now, the challenge of sugar and fast food, I think, is one of free and informed consent. So we label cigarettes as saying these are highly addictive and very damaging to your health. So the disclosure is very high. I think sugar and fast food should have similar levels of disclosure. You should be able to eat a hamburger at McDonald's, but you should see the damage it does to you, and that should be spelled out very clearly. But the big food lobby has prevented any appropriate disclosure from happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's these debates are the most fun, or these conversations are the most fun, but it's like it's frustrating because at the end you have, the big food lobby that it doesn't matter anyways what you what
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
But what I would say is that don't discount the fact that one person, if they dedicate their life to solving a problem, can solve it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And no matter how powerful McDonald's is, or Archer Daniels Midland, or Coca-Cola, if one person made it their focus, they could change it. And I really admire Secretary Robert F. Kennedy. Right, he's made this his mission: make America healthy again, and he
Yeah.
realizes how poisonous the food supply is in the U.S. And is doing something about it, and that has propelled him to the cabinet of the United States. And he was one step away from the presidency, based on this one very simple message: is that Americans aren't healthy, and its root cause is the food system.
And how frustrating is that when you see like I think the example is like Tyson Chick. Some company was just like, hey, okay, now we'll stop putting all the toxins in. It's like, wait, it's that easy? That's all we
Yeah.
had to do.
Well, all we had to do is elect a president who is willing to be disruptive, right? And that's what I really admire about the Trump administration. And I say that as I have a portrait of President Obama above my shoulder, right? I think President Trump, it will go down in history, because of his intrinsic skepticism of all institutions. He is willing to break things to build something better. And that transition will always be difficult. It will always be hard, but it does create extraordinary opportunities for new versions of the future.
When an enhanced athlete shatters a world record, is that a triumph of science or a funeral for tradition?
No, I like that. A funeral for tradition. Um, when the first athlete has already broken a world record. His name is Christian Golomev of Greece, and he broke the 50 freestyle world record in swimming, which is the premier record in the pool. It's one length of an Olympic-sized pool. Is that a funeral for tradition? Yes, I think it is. I think it is will be looked back as a watershed moment where we consider that tradition has changed, that institutions are changing, um, and that science has a more central role to play in the evolution of human progress than we have ever before.
And do you think that does that take away from, I mean, we talked about this a little bit already, but you're more excited about what could be rather than excited about what was, I guess. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the way our society has always been. It's like, how do we progress the human condition? We look to our history and say, what elements do we wish to retain, and what do we wish to throw away? I'm very optimistic about the place of technology in our society, of artificial intelligence, of brain-computer interfaces and human enhancement more generally. And we should always be pushing the technology envelope forward.
I'm tracking the brain chip interface topic closely. Aron, you've drawn investment from figures like Peter Thiel and Donald Trump Jr., visionaries to some, lightning rods to others. How did you choose your table of allies, and what strings, if any, come attached?
Well, that's a really insightful question. Um, I've been working with Peter Thiel now for nearly 2 decades. Um, I think back to the original conversations we had at Oxford University in 2009, and he's been proven absolutely correct about all the changes in the world that we have seen. Um, and has, as a result, been a very successful investor. Um, the I think for any project to be successful today, it needs to be bold and thought-provoking in a way that is different from other historical moments, because ultimately distribution today is all about social media. And there's the fact of the matter is that controversy travels 9 times faster than truth on social media. And this is why we have bold and provocative Donald Trump, not boring old Jimmy Carter. We have crazy Kim Kardashian, not boring Humphrey Bogart. And that's why we have the enhanced games and not the Olympics, because social media is intrinsically driven by thought-provoking and bold content.
So you and Peter Thiel obviously had that longer relationship. Do you just call him up one day and say, "Hey, I got this crazy idea"?
He calls me. No, actually, in fact, the way it happens is that um, we have dinner every New Year's. So New Year's Eve every year. We've done it for like almost 15 years now, with the exception of a couple of pandemic years. And from Christmas until New Year's, I always spend writing about what I'm going to do in the next year, new initiatives I want to create. And when I show up to New Year's Eve dinner, he always asks me, "What, Aaron? What did you write about?" And in 2022, I said, "Oh, I'm writing about an enhanced version of the Olympic Games."
So I thought about this a lot actually. You mentioned that every year you do this and you write out a lot of business ideas and you don't act on them. Can you share a couple of the ideas that you didn't act on that you think maybe somebody could have, or if you had more time, if you could clone yourself, you would have run with?
Oh, hundreds, hundreds. So I probably have 50 fully developed business plans and financial models sitting in my Google Drive that I haven't acted upon. One that received some public reporting was I was considering building a paid social network. So I think Substack meets Discord, because one of the problems that I foresee is that one of the most underpaid roles in our society is a community management. Community management is a very tough role. It's different from content creation, and community organizers are a very important part of our society. They're sort of the social secretaries that message you on a Thursday night saying, "Hey, what are we doing this weekend?" As much as the uh, community managers on a Reddit forum uh, don't have a direct way to monetize. And so I think there's someone is going to build a mechanism where individuals pay to access something that looks like a Discord server, and then the community manager captures some of those economics, which I think could be very successful. Another idea that I've had that I don't think anyone has created, but is a very tough one to solve, is that the president of the United States and members of the U.S. cabinet travel better than any billionaire, and take like a low level cabinet minister, the cabinet secretary for health and human services. He travels to any far end of the world, and he is met with a full force and support of the U.S. diplomatic service. Um, in contrast, a billionaire travels to the end of the world, and he just sort of gets out of his jet and standing there in line at the Ritz Carlton, checking into the presidential suite. And so I thought to myself, could I create a private diplomatic service to support the travel needs of the most wealthy people in the world, so that they can always have direct on ground support no matter where they are, just like the president does. And I haven't created that yet. So a couple ideas of the many that sit in the in tray.
In the drive. Yeah, that's cool. And then so obviously Peter Thiel, you guys do your annual dinner. How do you end up with Donald Trump Jr. as an investor?
Well, most people think it was through Teal, but it was in fact through my co-founder, Christian Angermeyer, who has a long-standing relationship with the Trump family, and with the partners of 1789 Capital, Ahmed Malik and Chris Buskirk. It was just such a strong alignment from day one. They believe in disrupting traditional institutions. They believe in challenging norms, and that's exactly what the Enhanced Games does.
Was there ever any thought? I mean, obviously you said, the controversy kind of sells tickets, right, in a way. But was there ever thought about, because back when you started this, I mean, the Trumps have been very polarizing for since he ran for president, obviously, the first time. But did you ever even think, should we hesitate to do this just because of the potential blowback there could be, or no?
No, because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were against the enhanced games. So the Biden White House issued a statement condemning the enhanced games in the summer of last year.
Hmm.
And that's when we knew the Democratic Party was against innovation. They were against science. They were against technology. And we see this so obviously with crypto. Like, the president supports innovation in financial services. The Democratic Party, with the undue influence of Elizabeth Warren, does not believe in technology. And so it's very clear. And my line is very simple. Like I sit here in my home in London with a portrait of President Barack Obama behind me. Um, is that I will accept the political patronage of anyone who believes in the enhanced movement, who believes in science, who believes in technology and in the ability of technology to progress the human species. And so we're very proud that members of the Saudi royal family, including Prince Khalid bin Talal, is among our investors, and the Trump family. And if prominent Democrats want to support us too, we will accept that also.
Athletes will own real equity in your league. Why was that ownership stake non-negotiable for you?
That's a great question, because I believe that athletes deserve to be rich, and the surefire way to create wealth in this day and age is by owning equity, and that there is a very strong alignment of incentives between shareholders, executives, and athletes if we're all equity aligned. You look at a company like OpenAI. Last I read, there are going to be uh, hundreds of people who will become billionaires when OpenAI goes public, because they were so generous with the equity compensation packages. That's why Americans are getting richer much faster, because a lot of companies, a lot of successful tech companies, are offering equity compensation packages, versus here in Europe. It's very rare to be offered any kind of equity compensation, and therefore the alignment of incentives, the desire to work hard, to push for growth in a company is much lower. Um, and then the workers don't share in the same kind of fruits of success that executives do.
That is something that always kind of bothered me about the Olympics. It's like the Olympians really don't make any money. It's very, very nominal compared to other sports. And the
Well,
people who don't play is,
yeah, and you know the IOC, the average U.S. Olympian only earns $30,000 a year, but the IOC president literally like flies around the world in a private jet and lives in a palace. You know, I'm not too critical of the NFL, the NBA, or the MLB because the commissioners are earning tens of millions, but the players are earning hundreds of millions. That's okay. But you can't have a situation like the Olympics where the bureaucrats earn millions and then the athletes earn effectively nothing.
do you think you could do the exact same model that you're doing with the enhanced games and just do it without, like, could you do the Olympics where athletes get a share and you don't have the bureaucracy and that stuff, or do you think it just wouldn't
No, it wouldn't work. It
compete
wouldn't work.
enough?
But people said to me, "Oh, well, you know, why do you have to add the enhancements? You could just have the Olympics plus money." And then I would say, like, who's going to pay for it, right? Where's the business model? And importantly, where's the customer acquisition mechanism? So ultimately, the bold, thought-provoking nature of what we are doing is why you have invited me on your podcast and not Michael Johnson, who created the Grand Slam track league with the inspiration to pay players a lot of money. But you know, no one tuned in to watch Grand Slam track. And it failed after just 1 year after raising $40 million. And why was that? Is because when they launched, they got 6 news articles. When I launched, I got 600. And you know, you have to do something bold and different and uniquely differentiated. It's like the WNBA. If this salary negotiation goes on and the WNBA players are paid 10 times as much money, does that mean they're going to get 10 times as much viewership? No, because there's no connection between athlete pay and viewership.
In your heart of hearts, is this venture more mission or more business?
That's a great question, Tim. I think the best businesses are those with high vision. So, why is that? It's because um, being an inspirational place to work attracts the most talented people in the world. And that's the only measure of success in a business. And so, why do very talented engineers graduating from like Berkeley or MIT go and work at SpaceX, not Boeing? Because Boeing is an old, dead bureaucracy that can't even get a spaceship into space anymore, or even fly an airplane safely. Versus SpaceX, its goal is to make humans interplanetary. Right, the vessel that is going to land us on Mars will be a SpaceX vehicle, and that vision translates to a higher multiple in public markets. It recruits better talent, and vision attracts consumers. And so having a bold, thought-provoking, audacious vision, I think, is essential for any company. Like, do you want to go to work for your whole life, you know, at a life insurance company or at a stale old bank? I don't think you do. Right? I think people actually want to do something that is meaningful and that, you know, significantly contributes to the human species.
You and Peter Thiel have fought battles together from the Gawker suit to funding the enhanced games. What's the single biggest lesson you've absorbed from working shoulder to shoulder with Peter?
I think that the single lesson that I have learned by working with Peter, particularly on the Gawker case, is that change only happens when someone puts a suit on and goes to work every day trying to solve a problem. Some of the most prominent individuals in the world were victims of Gawker's defamation machine: celebrities, billionaires, pro athletes. And all of them just accepted this as a part of life. And it was only Peter who thought to himself, I'm going to hire someone whose full time job it is to defeat Gawker. And that's why he hired me. And I think that is a very important lesson that change doesn't happen casually. Change only happens with high intention and focus. And if I look at the multitude of problems that exist in our society, like, you know, I live principally in New York City. There's trash everywhere in the streets. And I think to myself, is there a single person whose job it is to force accountability in the Department of Sanitation to clean up the streets of New York. And as far as I can tell, there is not one. And that is why the streets of New York are covered in trash.
You mentioned earlier too, we talked about Peter a little bit, but do you have what kind of the lessons you've learned and working with him and the things you've kind of, I guess, gained from being so close, but is there something they've added, Thiel and Donald Trump Jr. specifically, like outside of funding that you say like, oh, there's this huge, they opened this door or they connected us with that person, or has it been more kind of quiet, silent investors, passive investors?
So most venture capital firms promote that they offer significant what is called portfolio company support. Um,
Mm.
and they have these like wide offerings to support their portfolio companies. These are the worst venture capital firms because the best founders don't need any support. I don't need Peter to go and help me open doors. I could open those doors myself. And so it's only um, underperforming companies that need portfolio support. And second tier venture capital firms need to offer that to win those deals. And I think it's actually quite a negative signal. So, when I invest, I expect founders who are world class, who are going to dominate their category, and they need nothing from me. I'm going to write them a check and they're going to send me an invitation 5 years later to attend an opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. And then one day, like magically, shares show up in my brokerage account.
Let's rewind to the Hulk Hogan lawsuit. You were Mr. A, the strategist who toppled Gawker. What did that secret war teach you about justice and vengeance?
Well, it taught me that revenge is a dish best served cold. And it was a decade from when Gawker outed Peter to when we bankrupted them. But it also taught me how difficult litigation is. Litigation only works when you have a litigant who is highly motivated. Most people don't have the courage to go through tough litigation, challenging as it is, with depositions and testimony and having your personal life shredded. But there's something very powerful about Terry Bollea, professionally known as Hulk Hogan, and the strength of his character that allowed him to succeed.
Did that victory come with any personal cost? Sleepless nights, strained friendships, second thoughts?
The victory did not come with any second thoughts. It was life was very well justified after the victory. However, the Gawker lawsuit went on for nearly a decade. And during that time, I couldn't tell anyone what I was doing. I kept it a complete secret from my friends, family, etc. And so, my cover story was that I was an intellectual property consultant. I have a PhD in IP law, so it was acceptable that this is my field. Um, and the reason I told people I was a patent consultant is because there are no follow-up questions. People don't know anything about patent law, so they would just say, "Oh, well, that makes sense." And of course, you're being paid a lot of money. You're traveling around the world. You're meeting all these interesting people, and no one ever suspected, even people who knew both me and Peter and knew how much time we were spending together, that we were architecting this war on Gawker.
That's hilarious. You could have been working for the government. No one would have known. So
Yeah.
you're doing
So,
IP
yeah,
work.
it's a classic CIA cover story.
Sargon rocketed toward $1 billion valuation and then crashed. What scar tissue from that experience toughened you for the firestorm around the enhanced games?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so Sargon rocketed towards $1 billion valuation, came very close to an IPO. I sold out my shares to my co-founder when he got very optimistic about our trajectory, and I think overly optimistic. A lot of people, when I did that transaction, said, "Aaron, you're going out too early. You're going to leave a lot of money on the table. You're going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars." Um, and I made more money out of that than anyone else because I manage my risk very carefully. And I believe, and I always say, that capitalism is the most addictive drug ever invented. Fame is number two. And like any gambler, you have to know when to quit, and to manage your downside risk. And I think that's really important for a lot of startup founders, and particularly visionary founders who kind of drink the Kool-Aid and think that they're invincible, and the only way is up. But markets change very rapidly, and some days are absolutely amazing, but markets crash, capital gets tight, and it's very important to know those lessons. So I'm glad that I've had successes, and I'm glad that I've had failures. And it's been a privilege to build every company I've been involved in.
What made you just, was it the number, was the number high enough that you said, okay, I don't care if I leave some money on the table, I'm happy to, because the number is just so good I can walk away? Or did you think that there was maybe a crack in the cup?
Um, I always have a number,
Yeah.
and the number is a lot lower than most people expect. People say, why aren't you trying to make billions or tens of billions of dollars? And I say, if you have $10 billion in the bank, conservatively invested, that will generate $500 million a year in free cash. Like, that's an unimaginable sum of money. Even at $1 billion, you've got $50 million a year in free cash. To live the most extravagant lifestyle probably costs 1 to 2 million a year, even if that. And my lifestyle doesn't cost anything near that. And so, I'm always fine to leave upside on the table if it preserves my downside risk.
When you were facing public criticism, the dangerous clown show headlines, where did you find calm? Prayer, family, a hard workout?
That's another great question. Yes. So, in many challenging moments, one does find calm at home with my family. But also, nothing that has happened so far in the history of the enhanced games has been unpredicted. If you asked me 3 years ago when I was first conceptualizing this, of course I was certain that the mainstream media would criticize us. I wanted them to criticize us because that generated more attention. Did I know that the International Olympic Committee and its cronies would, ban our athletes, that they would do everything in their power to scurry the games? Of course, I predicted that this would happen. And so it is very comforting to know that one's predictions come true. And if you have the opportunity to foresee the future and it does come true, it doesn't cause very much stress.
What would it take for you to be, I don't want to say something, have someone try to do it, but what would it take for something to make, I guess, shake you in the enhanced games? Would it take, athletes not participating, or would it take, like, is there something that would catch you off guard with it? Or you're kind of, you kind of looked at all the downside?
Well, one great privilege of doing thousands of media interviews is that I speak to the smartest journalists in the world almost every day, and they criticize my idea. They try and find holes in it, and that sometimes forces me back to the drawing board to try and predict what risks that we have, and adjust accordingly. So, despite having garnered great wealth in my life, I will never start a company without raising external funding, because when you go through the process of fundraising, it's actually very instructive in finding holes in your thesis, because a lot of people are just too nice. They say, yes, oh, that's a good idea, go ahead. But when you say, put money on the table, that's when truth comes out, and validates your concept, or the opposite, unvalidates it.
If you could write your epithet today, what single line would you want etched beneath your name?
Yeah, so I've thought about this. I would like to be buried in the chapel of Harris Manchester College at Oxford University, where I studied, where I got married, And I would like my gravestone to say Aron D'Souza, the founder of the Enhanced Age. Not the founder of the Enhanced Games, but the founder of the next age of mankind that took us from the information age to an age where technology enhances the human condition.
So the enhanced games, I mean, have clearly consumed your life, which is one of the things that makes you so interesting. And my guess is this is how you get on everything in your life. But you also said you've got a number on everything. I am not trying to buy you out, and I don't have enough to meet that number. But do you have a number for the enhanced games, or does your mission need to reach a certain point before you would even consider a number?
Um, I believe that the enhanced age is inevitable. We've laid the intellectual groundwork. So even if I closed my laptop now and went home, the games will happen, the enhanced age will happen, and it's just a question of, am I the beneficiary of it? Is the company the beneficiary of it? But I'm certain this will happen because we've laid the idea out there. It has gone viral. It has entered the common consciousness. There are over a dozen people writing books about the enhanced games. There's people who've got Fulbright fellowships to study us. And so then the question is the economic number, because I believe the mission will be fulfilled by the great number of people who have supported the games and in turn the age of enhancement that will come. But no, I'm not going to tell you my number because that will then
Yeah.
affect any commercial negotiations I have with private equity funds one day.
But okay, let's rewind for a second. You come up with the idea, you and Peter have your dinner. He says, dude, you got to do this. You start running with it. If somebody had approached you right out of the gate and said, "Hey, I'll buy you out of this thing. I want to take this and go with it," would you have done it, or you needed it to get to a point that you think the mission is a success, regardless of if you're involved or not involved, before you consider a sale?
I would only consider a sale if I believe that the purchaser would contribute to the inevitability of the enhanced stage. So if like the International Olympic Committee came in and said, "Oh, we'll buy you out for $1 billion to shut this down," I'd say no, not in a million years. But if a private equity fund came in and said, "Oh, we really believe in this. We have a lot of like event management experience. We have a lot of distribution capabilities. There are portfolio synergies." I'd be like, "Yeah, I'd seriously consider that." Right? Will it continue the mission? Is what is most important to me. And like I've had three exits. Life's pretty good. Do I need to buy more, Patek watches or Ferraris? No, I don't. I think that's a very indulgent life, and it would be much better to, continue to build things that really matter and improve our society.
On that first exit, when the the wire hits your account, did you think about maybe I should just chill out and do nothing, or did you immediately think, what can I build with this?
No, I went into the Google Drive and I said, okay, here are the 50 business plans. What am I going to do next? And I continue to look back in that drive in that folder and say, am I acting in the highest and best use of my time? Because the single scarce resource is not money, it is time. It is my time. And so that's a question I always ask myself.
Time is something people typically take for granted until it's too late. But Aron, what do you hope the listeners, parents, coaches, young athletes take away from your story about risk, reward, and responsibility?
That's a great question. And I actually wrote my Oxford admission essay about this more than 20 years ago, uh, which is that uh, I believe we do not take enough intelligent risk as a society. And I didn't have the word for it. And Professor Jonathan Haidt at NYU actually came up with a better word for it: safety culture. We have this pernicious culture that obsesses about safety and not about taking intelligent risk. And so the dominant thesis of modernity has been to eliminate as many risks as possible. But then the most talented people realize that there is no risk without reward. And those are the winners of capitalism. the risk taker is not the safetiest. And I think this is one of the major dialectics that exists in our society. And so I hope that viewers of the enhanced games will take away the view that there are risks. There are risks to building the future. There's a 1 out of 16 chance of dying and going to space, a 1 out of 100 chance of climbing Mount Everest, and that performance enhancement is significantly safer than both of those. But because of a deep safetyist, anti-risk, anti-innovation mentality um, by the International Olympic Committee, we stopped innovation, and now we've opened that door.
Aron, when all the noise quiets down, what still makes you marvel at this simple joy of sport?
Well, when I meet athletes of any level, I'm always impressed by their abilities. I was an athlete and am still to this day. And when I see elite performance, it always takes my breath away. When someone can high jump, when a figure skater can do a triple axel, or when a swimmer gracefully butterflies through the pool, there is something intrinsically beautiful about human performance. And I think that as we enter a more and more artificial world where smartphones consume our lives, where artificial intelligence is a co-pilot, then eventually in the driver's seat of our own thinking, we will always look to excellence in the performance of our own bodies, because that is the vessel of our lived experience. And as human beings, we can always appreciate how others who perform at a higher level are an inspiration. And I think that's very important.
In all of life's turbulence, have you ever turned to faith of any kind to try to bring some stability? Personally, it's brought me a lot of peace and tranquility in my life.
That's an excellent question. And so if you asked me 2 decades ago, I would have said I'm an ardent atheist. And a decade ago, I would have said I'm agnostic. And today, I would say I'm open to faith. And this question was posed to me actually in a legal document a few months ago when I got married. Because here in the United Kingdom, you can only be married in a church if it is, quote, your regular place of worship. And so I wanted to be married at my college chapel at Oxford. And as I sat down with the chaplain, she asked me this question: is the chapel your regular place of worship? And I thought to myself, well, I've never been baptized. The only place that I have ever attended chapel was at Oxford. And so therefore it is my regular place of worship. And I signed a legal declaration to that effect. And that invited me to introspect on how deeply faith has, and my notion of faith in my life has changed. And as in studying the enhanced games, I have also realized that faith is something that we are biologically have evolved biologically to accept. As Jean-Paul Sartre calls it, the God-shaped hole. Um, and the quick summary of the thesis is that evolution happens both on an individual and a group level. And groups that are more cooperative uh, outcompete groups that are less cooperative. And so groups that have some kind of social glue are more likely to succeed than those that do not. And the way that this is manifested in Homo sapiens is in our belief in God. And that is part of the social glue that has made us a stronger species as compared to, say, Neanderthals, that allowed us to evolve. And only since the rise of modernity and an atheistic culture have we forgotten about God. It's the Nietzsche quote, God is dead. Um, and that has left a God shaped hole in our heart, which has been filled by the cult of celebrity, the culture of sport, and many other entities. And I think these are all very much interrelated.
So when you say you're open to faith, would you ever, I guess, consider like leaning into it and trying it and taking it seriously, or you're more just open to the idea of it?
I think faith is a journey, and I think that if you read all the great philosophers, faith that is acquired in an organic an intentional way as an adult is more profound than one that is forced upon a child. And so I read a great many theologians. I'm a great fan of Martin Luther. And I think what Martin Luther s- stood for and how he challenged the institution of the Catholic Church in 1517 is deeply instructive to me. And that if I ever adopted a faith, it probably would be of the Protestant Reformation ilk. Um, and it's something that I'm open to. Uh, and it's something that I think about, not quite actively, but certainly it enters my mind from time to time.
I'm in a similar kind of place, probably a little further along, but my dad feels like so strongly about it. A lot of people in my life that I really love feel so strongly about it. I say to people, like, I haven't had like that. The switch hasn't flipped for me. I see it. I recognize. I see all the good in it. I see where it fits. I see why it makes sense. But I just haven't had that, whatever that is. And maybe there isn't that. And maybe it's just a slow journey, as you said.
Well, and I think, Troy, you are reflecting much of um, young men in American society today. Obviously, there's been this strong religious revival, particularly among young men. It's counter to the long-term trend since the Second World War of secularism. And we ask ourselves, why is this happening in this day and age, particularly among young men? And what is the impact of this going to be on our wider society?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been seeing that stuff too, that it's the numbers have like tripled in it was, as you said, it was kind of just falling off a cliff and now all of a sudden it's shooting back up.
Yeah, and it is. I think this is going to have a very profound effect on voting patterns and politics over the next generation.
Yeah. I wonder if it's just the pendulum swings back and forth and it's finally going back the other way, or if there's something deeper behind it, almost like a rejection of where we were headed for the last, I guess you said, since World War II.
Well, the I don't think that religion has ever left our society, even though most people claim to be atheist. Most young people claim to be atheist in the 20th and 21st centuries. Um, And I believe that just other things that have the aspects of religion have filled that God-shaped hole, whether it's celebrity, it's sport, or even political movements.
Mm.
You look at climate change, for example, has all the hallmarks of an apocalypse cult, right? If you don't sacrifice today your behavior for this thing you cannot see or cannot even accurately measure, hell and brimstone will rain down upon you, and the world will fail. And so, therefore, you must sacrifice everything to the cult of carbon, right? It's exactly structured like a
It's
religion,
true. It's true. I've never heard it phrased that way, but it's so true.
but it makes perfect sense,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Yeah, and so all social movements, I believe, that are dramatically successful have some kind of religious structuring to them, because as I go back to the Satra argument, is that we evolved to be religious, right? There's something deep in our human biology um, that means that we are religious. And this is a reason why that every human society until the 20th century had a religious foundation to it. Like atheism was unknown uh, in virtually all cultures for millennia. And so new social movements, they might not call themselves religions, but they take many of those aspects and prey upon our biological inclinations.
Oh, you have to try reading C.S. Lewis.
I was gonna say too, you got to check out. We had Lee Strobel. Have you ever heard the book or seen the book, The Case for Christ?
I have not, no.
It's a good. It's like the case for Christ, like trying to make it like a legal argument.
Hmm.
I feel like with your background, you'd appreciate. We're both attorneys in the States, and I liked the layout of it and the how it was set up. My dad's like C.S. Lewis, but Lee Strobel wrote The Case for Christ. I would recommend it if you're into it. And
Mhm.
it's cool
I'll,
how he does
I'll
it.
order it on Amazon.
At the end of each podcast, I try to give our guests the opportunity to brag about their family. I don't think there's anything more important, so please brag away.
Well, that's wonderful. I feel very proud of the family that I was born into and the family that I'm creating. So let me tell you about my my ancestors first. So my great great grandfather is said to be the first um, Chinese person, the first Asian person to live in Australia. He went on to found the first Chinese temple in Australia. He was a seed investor in what is today the third largest bank in the country, and an anchor of our community. My mom's side of the family are all distinguished business people and entrepreneurs. In particular, my mom's father was a restaurateur, and he said one thing that was always struck me: to be successful in life, you only need to be in the best in the world at one thing. And his thing was making fried rice. He was the best fried rice maker in the world. And for decades, he had one of the most acclaimed restaurants in Australia. My father's side of the family is much more modest. They were farmers in India. And my dad got a scholarship to study abroad, became a cardiologist, and is a very distinguished scientist today. Um, my mom and dad met at at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, where my dad was working and my mom was teaching. And they brought me into this world, and I've had every privilege that life could ever offer me. And I would say I had the right level of privilege, not so privileged that I never had to work, but privileged enough that I could. um be educated at the best institutions in the world, and still hungry enough to want to capture my own opportunities. I'm very fortunate now to be married to a wonderful husband, Harry, and we're working on building a family of our own, and a future of our own, inspired by the light of our ancestors and the tremendous heritage and reputations that we wish to uphold. So it's a very nice way to end the podcast.
Now, on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
The happiest moment of my life was when I got married.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
I'm not into failure porn. I think that too many startup entrepreneurs obsess about adversity. I've had an extraordinarily privileged life, and by every measure, I've had no significant adversity compared to others.
What are you most excited about?
Everything excites me about the future. I think the future is wonderful. Technology is wonderful, and that we literally have the ability to craft the vision that we wish to bring into the world. And so I think that everyone should have the opportunity to create the future that they wish to have.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I think that my trajectory in life has been relatively seamless and always upward. And so I would say to my younger self, trust yourself and trust that those that are more successful than you. Don't listen to the naysayers who say it's not possible. But I never did. And that's why where I am today.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Titan by Ron Chernow, which is the biography of John D. Rockefeller. I read it first when I was about 15 years old, then when I was 25, and then at 35. It's a serious book, and it's very insightful in as someone who has always had big dreams and big ambitions. The other book that's also related is The Prize, which is the history of oil. You cannot understand the world we live in today without understanding energy policy. And most people dramatically underappreciate and misunderstand the place of energy policy in our society.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I would say, as words of wisdom to your listeners out there, is that whatever you can dream up, you can create. The most scarce resource in this world is not money, it is not ideas, but it is agency. It is those who have the belief to take an idea from a cocktail napkin and make it a reality. And we need more people who can force their vision of the future onto the world because we have so many problems that are so deeply in need of just one committed individual to solve.
Awesome. Aaron, real
Great.
last question. Real
Oh,
last
yes.
one. At the end of every episode, we ask all our guests you got to know us a little bit, you know, kind of the podcast, the theme, what we're going for. Who are a couple of people that you know personally that you think we should try to get on the podcast to tell their story?
Uh, oh, so many, so many. You should speak to our athletes, Christian Kolomev and James Magnuson, among them, both two of most distinguished swimmers in history. I think you should go ask the now newly retired president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, to give his response. I don't think he will. I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs and visionaries that would be a place to connect you with.
Thanks for coming on Nothing Left Unsaid. Your work sits at the intersection of power, privacy, and disruption. And whether people agree with your methods or not, it's clear you're shaping the future in bold, unapologetic ways. I appreciate you pulling back the curtain today and giving us a glimpse into how you think and operate. Again, thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much.